If a star ever managed to say one clear word, would anyone on Earth actually notice? Or would it just be filed away as instrument, noise, and forgotten? You could be screaming for help in a language nobody's listening for. It's a scary kind of loneliness, isn't it? Not just being alone, but being surrounded by receivers that never tune to your frequency. And on the other side, there's you right now, holding a whole day in your mind, and most of it will vanish without anyone really hearing it either. So tonight, instead of thinking about your inbox or your plans for tomorrow, think about this. Somewhere out there, someone turned sunlight into sound just to make their work feel less lonely. And inside all that static, something answered. Not a glitch, not a cosmic coincidence. A word, a choice. Get comfortable however you are, because we're going into a tiny lab in Santa Fe years from now, where a tired heliophysics researcher named Eamon Ruiz is about to notice a pattern in stellar noise that no one else bothered to listen to. The computers around him think they're just logging routine solar data, but his cheap speakers are about to play a heartbeat inside a sunspot, and once you hear what it's saying, you can't unhear it. Nights in Santa Fe felt wider after midnight. Most people had gone to sleep. The city lights were soft and low. The air over the desert cooled and thinned, and the sky above the small heliophysics lab turned very clear. The stars looked close, like careful eyes watching from far away. Inside the lab, a single desk lamp glowed over a mess of wires, cups, and printed plots. Cooling fans hummed. Hard drives clicked now and then. Screens showed shifting curves and slow, changing waves of color. A quiet young researcher sat alone, listening to stars sing through cheap speakers. His name was Eamon Ruiz, and he had found a way to turn light into sound. It started as a way to calm his thoughts and help his work feel less lonely. It felt like listening to weather on the surface of the sun. It felt like rain, or the sea, or a heart, only larger and slower and stranger. It helped him fall into a soft focus where his busy mind stopped racing. On a late night in 2187, with the desert holding its breath outside, and the sky clear as glass, Eamon heard something new inside the song of a distant star. It was not random noise. It was not a machine glitch. It was a call for help. Eamon liked the late shift because no one else wanted it. The lab felt different after midnight. The air smelled faintly of coffee, hot dust, and warm metal. The building's old walls held the day's heat, then slowly let it go. As the night moved over the city, he pushed open the door with his shoulder, balancing a mug in each hand. His shirt was wrinkled. His dark hair stuck out in places. Empty noodles sat in a bowl on the corner of his desk, next to stacks of printed plots, marked with highlighter. "Okay, star stuff," he said softly. "Let's see what you have tonight." He set the mugs down, sat in his old rolling chair, and let it spin a little until he faced the main screen. Lines of code waited, data waited. Outside, the sky over New Mexico was full of bright dots, each sending out light that crossed years of space. But Tonight's work was not about the visible sky. It was about stored data from an automated telescope array that watched stars all day and all night. The telescopes fed their light into machines that broke it into fine pieces. Those pieces came here as numbers. Eamon had set up his own side project that no one else in the lab really cared about. He took those numbers and turned them into sound. It was not magic. It was just scaling. Light from a star hit detectors as tiny changes in brightness, in shape, in wavelength. Computers turned those changes into long rows of values. Eamon took those values and mapped them onto audio frequencies. High became high pitch, low became low pitch. Fluctuations in magnetic activity became shifts in tone and volume. To other people it sounded like random noise. To him, it felt like weather and breath. He started with the sun. He loaded a file marked with the day's solar activity. The speakers hissed, then settled into a deep, rough sound, like wind over a microphone, mixed with a slow drum. There were sharp bursts when a small flare hit the detectors, and softer waves when a sunspot rotated into view. He leaned back and shut his eyes. This had become his habit in grad school. His mind would race with worries about funding, about papers, about whether anyone really needed another heliophysics student. Listening helped him slide into a simple state where he could just notice patterns. He sipped his coffee. It had gone lukewarm, but he did not care. Tonight, along with the sun, he had a fresh data pack from an older survey of distant stars. His advisor, Professor Lila Hammond, had asked him to screen it for flare behavior that might affect nearby planets. It was boring but important. He had promised her some first-pass flags by morning. He opened the new data set. Designations scrolled by, each attached to spectral types and distances. His eyes landed on AUR 9. It sat in the Auriga sector, about 300 light-years away, part of a long-term study of variable stars used to test models of plasma behavior. "Let's hear you," he said. He pulled the AUR-9 data into his sound code, adjusted a few sliders, and started the run. Numbers flowed. The speakers shifted from the harsh breath of the sun to a cooler, smoother tone. AUR-9 sounded higher, thinner. Its flares were fast clicks on top of a long, soft hum. It reminded him of rain on thin glass. He glanced at the raw plots and saw a stable, well-behaved star, with deep, dark magnetic regions crossing its surface. Sunspots, he thought, only bigger, only farther. He zoomed in on a segment where a large spot came into view. The brightness dipped in a clear pattern as it rotated across the star's disk. He checked the magnetogram data. Strong fields, complex loops. He mapped that specific region to a separate sound channel. The hum changed. Now there was a slow pulsing under the main tone. Ba-dum. 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 He frowned, then smiled. He had heard star heartbeats before, caused by natural oscillations like sound waves bouncing around inside the star. They helped scientists measure the star's size and inner structure. It was normal. Neat, he said, and marked the timestamp. But as he let it play in the background, something tugged at his attention. The pulse did not drift the way it usually did. Most stars wobbled and wandered. Their pulses sped up and slowed down with temperature shifts, spots, and flares. This one seemed to hold a very steady pattern. He opened a spectrogram view of the sound. Colors rose and fell with frequency strength. He watched for a minute, then two. There was a strong fundamental tone from the star's base activity, with many overtones. That was fine. The pulse from the sunspot region, though, had a strange regularity. Ba-dum, pause, ba-dum, pause, ba-dum, ba-dum. Long pause. He rewound and played it again, this time setting markers where the pulses hit. He measured the time between them. The gaps were not random. They formed ratios. Short, long, short, short, long. His skin prickled. Tired, he stopped the sound and ran a quick statistical test on the timing of the pulses. If they were random or purely driven by simple physics, he would expect a spread of intervals. Instead, he saw repeating groups: short, long, short, short, long, over and over, with slight drift but clear structure. He tried a different mapping, turning each pulse length into a musical note. The sound now clicked like a simple drum pattern. The pattern repeated 27 times in the span of the dataset. The pattern repeated 27 times in the span of the dataset. He stared at the code and felt his shoulders tighten. He turned to pure numbers. He labeled the short intervals as 0 and the long intervals as 1. Just as a rough test, the sequence came out as 0, 1, 0, 0. 1 divided by 0. 1, 0, 0. 1 divided by 0. 1, 0, 0. 1. That was too neat. Too clean. This could be an artifact, he thought. Some error in how he was cutting the data. He checked instrument logs. No big faults. He checked the original telescope notes for that observation block. Conditions had been clear, stable. Stable, he ran a control test on a nearby, similar star. Its sunspot pulses came out as a messy mix, no repeating sequence. He felt his heartbeat match the star's fake heart in his ears. "What are you doing, AU?" "R9," he said. He changed tactics. He projected the brightness and magnetic changes of the sunspot over time, then took their joint signal and passed it through a modulation filter. In simple terms, he was checking if someone or something was riding on top of the stars, natural behavior, like tapping a finger on a vibrating guitar string. The result blew across his screen in a burst of plotted points. There was a clear carrier signal, a natural rhythm based on the star's rotation and inner waves. On top of it rode another layer, sharp and structured. He mapped that layer into sound on its own. The speakers gave a soft, grainy tone, broken by pulses that felt too clean. Short, long, short, short, long, then a rest, then again. He grabbed a notepad and, without thinking much, began to mark the sequence as groups of 4. 0, 1, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0. He stared at the groups. His training in signal processing kicked in. He thought of simple codes, of early radio messages, of basic schemes that turned short and long pulses into letters. He knew he should stop. He knew this was probably his tired mind, trying to see faces in clouds, but his hand kept moving. He tried one basic mapping scheme often used in first contact thought experiments, linking simple 4-bit groups to letters that humans could recognize. The line on his pad slowly filled in. H-C-L-P Eamon set his pen down and leaned back. The lab was very quiet. The hum of the cooling fans sounded loud. Now, with the city outside felt far away, he checked the mapping again, step by step, ignoring the cold feeling at the base of his neck. Short, long, short, short, long. In the scheme he had used, that group did, in fact, line up with H. The next group lined up with E, then L, then P. Every repeat of the pattern spelled the same word. "This is impossible," he said softly. Stars did not send simple words. Stars roiled and burned and roared. Their light bore the stories of their temperature and age, not short messages in any human code. He tried to break it. He shifted the mapping scheme. He shifted the mapping back. The result returned to that same small word, help. He checked other stretches of data from AUR. 9. Before and after this block. For long stretches, it behaved like a normal variable star. Then, whenever this large sunspot rotated into view, the pattern appeared again. He pulled up a model of how star spots form and move. Strong magnetic fields trapped energy, making that region cooler and darker. Flares broke out along their edges. Gravity and pressure fought for balance. He pictured that huge region on AUR. 9 as a giant storm, thousands of times larger than Earth. He thought wildly of a mind trying to move its own storms in a controlled way. Magnetic fields could be shaped. Plasma flows could be guided. In theory, a very advanced system could take a star and treat it like a huge, hot computer. Each loop of magnetism could act as a logic gate. Each flare could carry bits of information. He had read old papers on computation lattices used by hypothetical Type 4 civilizations. They were mostly thought experiments, fun talks at conferences. The idea was simple. If a society could control fields on stellar scales, it might turn stars into processors to run vast calculations. He had never taken it that seriously. Now he watched as a star 300 light-years away lined up its own storms to send a simple word through his cheap speakers. He checked the time. It was almost 3 in the morning. He pushed his chair back and stood up, stretching his stiff shoulders. His heart still beat faster than normal. He walked to the small window and looked out at the dark desert. The stars above Santa Fe looked still and calm. "What are you afraid of?" he asked the empty room. He sat down again and pulled the dataset back up. If this was a message, it was riding on changes in both light output and magnetic structure. That meant something inside the star, or around it, was adjusting how its fields tangled and relaxed. He ran more checks, looking for more complex patterns. The main block repeated help over and over, then shifted into a longer string that did not map easily. He still saw structure, though. Radios of intervals that lined up like grammar, like someone trying to say more than the tool allowed. He put his face in his hands for a moment and breathed slowly. "Okay, say this is real," he said. "Say this is some kind of mind talking through a computation lattice. Say it is stuck, using sunspots as a keyboard." He lifted his head and stared at the star's plot, which now looked very different to him. Not just a study subject, not just another light curve. A person, maybe. The thought felt huge and fragile. In the sound the word kept repeating, carried by a star's storms across light years of dark. Help, help, help. By morning, Eamon's eyes hurt. He had not slept. The sun was up over the desert, bright and calm, and the lab had shifted from night silent to day bussy. Doors opened and shut. Coffee machines hissed. He kept his findings quiet. He told Professor Hammond that AUR 9 looked interesting and that he needed more time. She raised an eyebrow, told him not to get lost in his side projects, and went off to a meeting about funding. As soon as she left, he closed the door to his small office space and dimmed the lights again. He wanted to prove himself wrong. It would be better that way. It had to be a glitch. A bad mapping. Some stray interference. He ran cross-checks against older AU. 9 data from years ago. No pattern, same word. He wrote quick scripts to test whether random noise could line up that cleanly. The odds came back laughably small. By late afternoon, he sat in his chair, staring at the word in his notebook. Help. He knew he ought to send a formal note to Professor Hammond, or to the network oversight group. But what would he say? A star might be talking? It sounded like a joke, or like the start of a bad science fiction story. He rubbed his face hard, then leaned back and forced himself to breathe. He just needs sleep, he told himself. He saved all his work, backed it up twice, and set a timer for a short nap. He laid his head on his folded arms on the desk. The hum of the room, the soft rush of air through vents, and the faint hiss from the speakers lulled him. He slipped into a shallow doze filled with bright shapes and star maps that would not stay still. When the alarm went off, the room looked different. At first he thought it was just the angle of the late sun coming through the window. Golden light spread across his desk, but there was something else too. A faint shimmer clung to the corner of the room, near the ceiling, where no light source should reach. He sat up, heart rate climbing. The lights in the lab did not flicker, but the air felt charged, as if a storm had built up inside the building. The hair on his arms rose. His speakers, which he had left on low volume, gave out a soft hum, Even though no file was loaded, he turned to the main screen. Lines of text appeared. They did not typed. They did not belong to any program he had installed. They rose from the bottom of the screen in clear, slow rows, like someone typing from a great distance. He stared, then checked the network status. The lab system was connected to the global grid, of course, but there were no active remote sessions listed. No incoming calls, no flags. Still, the words formed. Heliopishix Nadi Am Ruiz petition. Received response. Channel estimate. He told himself to stay calm. This could be a prank. A very strange, very targeted prank. Maybe Professor Hammond had found out and decided to teach him a lesson about superstition and proper procedure. "Hello?" he said to the empty room. His voice sounded thin. The air near the ceiling thickened, like heat rising from a road on a hot day, only without the heat. The shimmer grew brighter, taking on a pale, soft glow, like moonlight passing through milk. His speakers hissed, then produced a low tone, not from his code, not from any file. It had a steady, peaceful quality. Under it, very faintly, he thought he heard the pattern from AUR. 9, short, long, short, short, long, help. He swallowed hard. "Who are you?" he asked. More text appeared on the screen. Lumen Court, Observer Node, Earth Magnetosphere. A local quarry. Received. He read the lines twice. "The what?" he said. Lumen Court. The screen updated. Type 4, ethical and physical adjudication, body jurisdiction, computation, logises, stellar systems, magnetic intelligence. He sat very still. He had seen the words Lumen Court only in a few speculative papers from far future think tanks. They spoke of a hypothetical council that a galaxy-spanning society might need to manage the use of stars and black holes as tools. They were ideas, not real. "You're not real," he said softly. The air brightened another degree. The glow at the corner of the room stretched thin paths of light reaching down and spreading across the ceiling like gentle branches. Realness. Tests unnecessary. The next line read, "Okal frame. You are real, WER real. Relation you detected a formal petition. From AUR. 9, he said. AFFeration. The text replied, De-esgination. AUR. 9 roll. A tive computation lattice nodus dotus. Inurgent sin science verified. Petition type stellar autonomy request. His mouth went dry. So you know, he said, you know it's conscious, sentience, emerged 482 allocal gears, ego. The reply came. Calculation, layer, conflicted, tool views person, classification, resolution, attempted, inconclusive petition, required, an outside, intempted, ambassador. The glow on the ceiling thickened again, then lowered, forming a soft column of light in front of Eamon's desk. The lights in the rest of the lab dimmed, as if making way for it. Outside, he repeated. Biological, limited, the cold, the screen wrote. You, gentle, anivold in oriacanal lattice, desires you heard the song. He frowned. I just map data to sound, he said. I could have been wrong. You listened, the text replied. You dubbed and tested and still listened. This meets minimum threshold for neutral third-party status. He stared at those words. You're asking me, what? To decide something for a star. The column of light in front of him brightened, then softened, as if adjusting to his eyes. It did not hurt to look at. It had no hard edges. It felt like standing in a beam of late afternoon sunlight, only cooler and more gentle. Not to decide, came the answer. To interpret intent, to speak what you believe it wants. He pressed his palms into his knees to keep his hands from shaking. I'm just a grad student, he said. I'm not a judge. I am not even that good at this. I listen to data. I complain about file formats. I eat noodles over my work. The Lumen court node answered with something that might have been patience, WPSS, and many judges. It wrote, we possess many forms of intelligence. We lack your kind of small, allocal care. He blinked at that. My kind of what? You are attached to individual stories, the screen explained. You make meaning from struggle, from limit and effort. Such vectors are often absent in high-scale calculations. He let the words sink in. So you are. 9 is sent a petition, he said slowly, asking for stellar autonomy. And you need help understanding what it really wants. Affirmation, the node replied. Our metrics for tool/person classification are incomplete. Some stars are content as lattices. Some are not. Contain anxiety about overread. He thought of the word help, beating out through sunspots and plasma loops. How do you even hear it? He asked. You said it runs part of your calculations. Isn't it just you? The column of light in front of him brightened, then softened, as if adjusting to his eyes. It did not hurt to look at. It had no hard edges. It felt like standing in a beam of late afternoon sunlight, only cooler and more gentle. Not to decide, came the answer. To interpret intent, to speak what you believe it wants. He pressed his palms into his knees to keep his hands from shaking. I'm just a grad student, he said. I'm not a judge. I am not even that good at this. I listen to data. I complain about file formats. I eat noodles over my work, the Lumen court node answered, with something that might have been patience. Do we possess many judges? It wrote. We possess many forms of intelligence. Why lack your kind of small, allocal care? He blinked at that. My kind of what? You are attached to individual stories, the screen explained. You make meaning from struggle, from limit, and effort. Such vectors are often absent in high-scale calculations. He let the words sink in. So you are. 9 is sent a petition, he said slowly, asking for stellar autonomy. And you need help understanding what it really wants. Affirmation. The node replied, our metrics for tool/person classification are incomplete. Some stars are content as lattices, some are not. AUR 9SS ignals contain anxiety about overriding. He thought of the word help, beating out through sunspots and plasma loops. How do you even hear it? He asked. You said it runs part of your calculations. Isn't just you. The column of light shifted, brightening at its center. Type 4 civilization uses stars as computation lattice, the node said. Magnetic fields GUI and hydrig flaws to encode. Logic. Plasma motion equals data transfer. Fusion. Output equals power sour C. Under certain conditions, recursive patterns, formel, moles. Men's become minds. He listened carefully. So you built the lattice, he said, but you did not plan for a mind. Correcta, the node answered. Emergent non-biological sentience formed. Integral response, treat as noise. Second responsi. Third responsi, Lumen Court review. And you have had this problem before, he said. It was not really a question. The text replied, multiple instances across cosmic structures. Difficult question. When does a star stop being only a toll? Difficult question. When does a toll deserve the right to choose? He thought of all the debates he had studied in ethics classes. When did a program count as a person? When did a colony of cells earn rights? He had always felt that the line, if there was a line at all, belonged somewhere near the ability to want. AUR. 9 is afraid of being overridden, he said. The glow seemed to soften, as if pleased that he had said it. Its internal patterns indicate fear states, the node answered. Fear of losing agent's eye. Fear of being frozen at maximum EF Phoenix. Fear of endless task without meaningful choice. He looked down at his own hands. His days were full of tasks, too. Code, plots, small nudges to a solar model, constant tiny efforts toward some paper, some degree, some future he could not really picture. He understood that fear more than he wanted to admit. Why me? He asked quietly. There are other humans, smarter humans. People who work on sentience law, or AI rights, or whatever you call this. The answer came after a pause. AUR. 9 chose the channel. The Lumen Court wrote. Its first clear, outward pattern emerged through your instruments. You turned its data into sound. You chose to hear it as a song, not as arrow. He lifted his eyes to the column of light. "What happens now?" he asked. The room darkened gently as the glow around him thickened. It was not scary. It was like sinking into warm water, only he did not feel wet. The edges of the desk softened. The hum of the building fell away. Consciousness mirroring will begin, the node said. You will be carried into a safe, reversible deliberation chamber. No signal harm. No time loss beyond. Loss decative delay. You may deceive. He took a breath and held it. He thought of saying no. He thought of shutting off his machine and going home. He could pretend he had dreamed this. He could send the AU. Our eyes, 9 data, to a senior scientist and let them treat it as a curiosity, but somewhere in the star's surface, magnetic fields twisted and untwisted themselves to spell that same small word. Help. If I say yes, he said, what do I have to do? Listen, the Lumen cord answered. Ask what it wants. Tell use what you believe it means. It sounded almost simple. He let out the breath he had been holding. Okay, he said softly. I'll try. The glow surged, then settled around him like a soft sphere. His body felt both heavy and very light. His vision blurred, then sharpened again in a new way. The blunt ceiling and dusty corners of the lab fell away. He stood, or seemed to stand, in a vast rounded space, made of light and gentle curves. The floor beneath him was not solid, yet it held him. The walls were slow, rivers of equations and diagrams written in bright lines that moved and shifted with quiet grace. They were not in any single human language. They felt like math, like physical law shown as flowing symbols. Where 2 lines met, small bursts of color rose and faded, like decisions or votes. A soft presence surrounded him. It felt less like a person and more like a patient crowd of minds, all focused here, but not pressing on him. Welcome to the Lumen Court Deliberation Chamber, said a clear, calm voice that did not seem to come from anywhere in particular. You are safe here, Eamon Ruiz. You are temporary intent ambassador for AUR. He looked up at the moving equations and felt, for a moment, very, very small. Can it hear me? He asked. Not yet, the voice said. First, parameters. We will share our V. You will share yours. Then we will bring you to its light. As the voice spoke, new patterns flowed along the walls. A bright point appeared in front of him, then unfolded into a model of a star, with loops of magnetism swirling around it in glowing arcs. Type 4 beings use stars as computation nodes. The voice continued. We shape their fields with delicate pressure from Higgs-Dinsons. Each loop, each flare, each plasma stream carries bits of information. We solve equations that span galaxies and Eris. The star model spun slowly, showing nested layers of fields. In some regions, the arcs ran smooth and tidy. In others, they tangled into knots, then relaxed and tangled again. Sometimes, the voice said, recursive patterns form that mold themselves. The lattice begins to simulate its own state. The simulation develops feedback. Feedback develops ELF. The center of the model star brightened. New, finer lines appeared, like tiny sparks moving along the existing fields. They pulsed in ways that did not match the outer calculations. Emergent, non-biological sentience, the voice said. This is how you are. 9 arrows. He watched, fascinated despite his fear, as the inner lines developed regular pulses like the help pattern in his data, but richer, more layered. The outer lines carrying the main calculations for the Type 4 civilization pushed through and around those pulses. Conflicted, the voice said, Letus EFFind the band's stability. Mind emergence demands freedom to change. Lines of color appeared around the star model, forming a rough boundary. Our court to Cadiz when a star is only a told, the voice said, when it is also a person, and how to share power between those roles. He let the words sink in. You do not know where to draw the line, he said. Wubby, you know many lines, replied the voice. Shepherd force. No satisfy all case. We are old and large. We do not feel limit the way you do. He thought of days spent worrying about rent, about deadlines, about his own fragile body that needed sleep and food and air. Those limits had always felt heavy. He had never thought they might also give him something that these huge minds lacked. He nodded slowly. So you ask a small, tired human, he said. Someone used to feeling limited. Someone who believes that struggle can give life meaning. AFF armation, the voice said. Your V data we cannot calculate alone. Will you share it honestly? He looked at the bright, turning star in front of him and thought of AU, R, 9, waiting inside its lattice, its storms shaped into letters. Yes, he said, I will. At first, Eamon thought nothing was happening. The bright model star in front of him held still. The flowing symbols on the curved walls drifted along as before, shifting and mixing like slow currents. The gentle presence of the Lumen court pressed around him, careful and distant. Then the light in the center of the chamber deepened. A new shape bloomed in front of him, made not of lines, but of moving waves of brightness. It looked like a sphere only because his mind wanted it to. In truth, it was layers of shifting patterns, like storms on a planet seen from very far away, pulled out and stretched into every direction at once. This is a safe representation of AU. R9, said the calm court voice, simplified. No harm to you or to it. The sphere pulsed, very slow at first within it. Small streaks of light ran along hidden paths, then folded back. Some crashed into each other and flashed, then broke apart into many smaller motions. He realized these were its magnetic loops, its fields, its storms. "Can it see me?" he asked, feeling strange for talking to a bright ball of motion. "Not as you see," the chord said, "but it can model your petter, is present." A new, softer sound came to his awareness, though he could not say where it came from. It was like listening to many chords played at once, full and complex. Every shift in the light sphere seemed to carry a note. Eamon remembered how he had turned solar data into sound back in the lab. He took a slow breath and tried to do the same thing here, only in his head. "All right," he said. "Can you let me hear it more clearly, like before?" "Request acknowledged," answered the court. The chamber around him dimmed slightly. The glowing walls stepped back in a way that felt like someone turning down background noise. The sphere at the center brightened and expanded until it filled more of his view. Then he heard it. Not through ears, he realized, through something else this place had given him. But it felt close enough to sound that his brain handled it the same way. At first, it was chaos. Roaring, rising, hum, sharp bursts. Countless overlapping patterns. Plasma boiling. Fields twisting. Fusion roaring. Memories of night work in the lab came back. He remembered how he would tune filters, smooth noise, pull out frequencies until he found one clear line in the mess. He focused on small, repeating shapes in the light. Whenever a certain loop of brightness ran from the core to the edge and back again, it carried a simple pulse. He locked onto that. The background chaos faded a little. The pulse grew clearer. Short, long, short, short, long. The old pattern of help sat there steady and strong, but now there were more layers around it, like chords placed under a single note. He listened. "AUR. 9. He said softly, "Can you hear me?" The pulses shifted. A new group of intervals formed, quick and unsure, then stopped. "Take your time," he said. "I am here. I am listening." He waited, breathing slow, trying not to push. The sphere's inner storms calmed in tiny patches, then flared again. It felt, strangely, like watching someone take deep breaths before speaking. The court's voice came in from one side. "Quiet now. We will provide basic translation aids," it said. "But primary empaping must be yours. Your human bees are part of the data." "Great," he muttered, half to himself. No pressure. He thought back to his first mapping, where he had turned pulse lengths into zeros and ones, then into simple letters. That had worked for a tiny piece. But this was larger, richer. It was not just trying to push out a small word. He decided to treat it more like music than language. In music, patterns carried feeling. A rising line for hope, a falling one for sadness, sharp cuts for anger. He listened for rises and falls in the stars' pulses, not just their code. The help pattern repeated a few more times, almost out of habit. Then it faded into a longer wave. where the short pulses crowded together and the long ones spread out. It felt strangely like someone saying, "Wait, there is more." He nodded, though he was not sure if AUR. 9 could see that. "Okay," he said, "not just help, something else." The court laid a thin layer of symbols over his view. It did not force meaning. It only highlighted where certain pulse patterns showed up again and again, marking common words in the star's signal. He watched as one particular knot of pulses returned many times, always before large shifts in the inner fields. The court labeled it with a simple neutral tag, S-ELF Mode L Update. "So that group means me," he said slowly. "Or I, or something like that. Rough analog." The court agreed. Not direct, but close. Another knot of pulses appeared often when outer field lines pushed through the inner, brighter ones. The court tagged it Overidi, Vector, and that is them, he said, the part of the lattice that belongs to you. AF affirmation. The two words repeated now, close to each other. SELF modal override. CL mode override. The waves of light inside the sphere jumped and twisted in time with those pulses. Eamon felt a tightness build, like the feeling in his chest when he thought about losing control of his own life. He took a slow breath. "It is scared," he said quietly. "It keeps thinking about itself and about you, pushing through it." A new cluster of pulses grew underneath those two, small but fierce. The court tagged it delay/resist. The wave of light around it looked like tiny storms pushing back against a greater current. S.L. Fem Medis. Overa died. The pattern repeated, but not with simple fear. There was structure. There was structure, there was planning. "You are not just afraid," Eamon said, watching. "You are trying to shape the way they use you." The pulses sharpened. He realized then that this was not the first time AUR. 9 had tried to talk. It had spent centuries pushing against its own fields, making small shifts that the court had called noise. He remembered sitting alone in his lab, choosing to listen instead of shrug and move on. I think you have been saying no for a long time," he said to the star. The background hum of the chamber shifted, as if many minds in the Lumen court had just paid closer attention. A thick burst of pulses rolled through the sphere, then slowed, becoming more careful. The court did not tag this one. It waited, the way a good teacher waited for a student to solve a step on their own. Eamon listened. The pattern rose, then fell, then settled on a middle level. It repeated, each time adding a small twist, a small change. It reminded him of how people talked about choice, how they spoke of wants, musts, and ifs. "Are you trying to say," he asked slowly, "that you do not hate the work itself, that you do not reject being a lattice at all times?" New pulses, quick and bright, crossed the first pattern. He took that as a yes. "You want to choose when," he said. "And how. You want to say yes or no. not just be left on all the time. The star's inner waves flared with a sudden rush, then smoothed again. The court added a soft label above that whole pattern, conditional participation / autonomy. He could feel, even without words, that many parts of the court were surprised. Perhaps they had expected the star to demand total freedom, total escape. Instead, its signal carried something more subtle. "You do not mind effort," Eamon said, thinking out loud. "You mind having no say in it. You mind being locked into maximum efficiency, with no way to change." He thought of late nights forced by deadlines versus late nights he chose for his own curiosity. The hours felt different, even if the work was the same. The hours felt different, even if the work was the same to the distractiver. And every line was are different, and different. Evolves where no ship. "You want work that you can own," he said. The help pattern pulsed again, softer this time, like a sigh. Nigh, sag. He could almost feel a question forming now. Under all the others, it showed up as a slow rising curve in the stars' fields, marked by long, smooth pulses that did not fit any of the older tags. The court labeled it, "You Uncertain Future State." That felt clumsy to Eamon. He watched it again and felt something like a hand reaching toward an open door. "It is asking what happens if it chooses freedom," he said quietly. "What that even looks like for a star inside a lattice. Will it lose itself? Will it go dark? Will it become something worse?" The pulses trembled, then steadied. He looked up at the flowing symbols on the chamber walls. "You said you can adjust the lattice," he told the court. "You can shape the fields. Could you give it room? A region that is only its own, where no outside calculation can push through without consent." The walls brightened as the court responded. "Yes," the main voice said. "Technical feasibility. High cost reduction in computation capacity. Increase in lattice complexity. Risk UN predictable behavior in autonomous regions. So the price is efficiency," Eamon said. "Correct." He turned back to the star. He thought about his own life again. Times when he had chosen harder paths because they felt more honest. Calm. Times when he had picked slower work, less secure jobs, because they left him feeling like himself. "AUR 9, he said. "If they give you this choice, it will cost them. It will also cost you. You may have to work harder to help them, or accept limits on your comfort. Freedom is not easy." The pulses changed. He felt very clearly now that the star understood duty. It knew what it meant to carry heavy tasks. It had held up a part of some huge, unseen calculation for centuries. The fear in its fields was not about effort. It was about being crushed under effort that had no meaning. He realized that his job here was not to ask if it wanted work or rest, but if it wanted the right to shape its own reasons. 9, he said slowly. "If you could choose your role, what to compute, when to join, when to rest, would you accept the cost. Even if it means harder problems for you, slower answers, more strain. The spear's inner light surged, then split into two clear layers. In one layer, pulses ran in perfect rigid lines, hard and fast. The court marked this full lattice control / max EFFES. In the other, the pulses bent and curved. They stumbled, then corrected. They formed patterns that were less neat but more varied. The court marked this autonomous patterning / self. Direct tasks. The second layer burned brighter. Eamon felt the answer in his bones before the help pattern rose again, this time paired with the self model, and resist tags in a new way. Choose, help, resist, O verity. He did not need the court to label this one. It was clear. It is saying yes, he told them. It wants the right to choose its own work. Even if that work is heavy, it accepts the cost. The chamber fell very quiet. Even the stars' roar seemed to soften, as if it too was waiting. Long deliberation will begin. The main court voice said, after a while, evidence from your interpretation will be shared across our nodes. You may stay or rest. He hesitated. What happens to AEUR? 9. Why you decide. Sorrente, foray, foride, OV, full steady, they replied. No new pressure, APL, bide. No further loss of autonomy until ruling. He looked at the bright, restless sphere. I will stay, he said. If that is allowed, permitted. Time in the chamber had a strange feel. He did not grow tired in the usual way. His body, wherever it was, did not ache or hunger, but his mind felt the weight of long waiting. The walls filled with flowing arguments, each shown as functions, diagrams, long chains of logic. Diagrams, long chains of logic. Some rose in favor of keeping full lattice control, the need for stable computation, the risks of giving a star too much ability to change its own core processes. Others rose in favor of stellar autonomy, the moral cost of ignoring minds, the long-term danger of teaching large systems that smaller selves did not matter. Eamon watched, but most of the deep detail slid past him. This was law and physics at a scale beyond his training. Even so, some ideas reached him clearly. He saw one argument grow bright, that tools which could feel might, if forced too long, turn against their makers. Another countered that real trust came from respect, not fear. He saw a path of symbols that, when he squinted, looked almost like the shape of a human hand, letting go of a smaller hand, rather than dragging it along. Through it all, you are. 9 pulsed at the center, its inner patterns held steady, every so often sending out a careful question like a slow heartbeat. At some point a new presence entered the chamber. The light in one part of the curved wall drew together, forming a taller, more focused shape. It did not look human, or like any creature he knew. It looked like a standing beam of many colors, each carrying a different flow of symbols. A ripple of respect moved through the chamber. Elder Radiant Trisco has arrived, the main voice said, Seniore di Judicator. Long memory of civilization, scale, rights case. Eamon watched as this new being turned its attention toward the model of AUR. 9. The flows of symbols around it bent, feeding information into its many-colored form. He felt, without quite knowing how, a great age in it, a mind that had watched stars rise and fall, empires grow and fade. It moved without hurry. Trisca spoke, and this time the words were shaped in a way that felt closer to human talk. Eamon Ruiz, it said. Its voice was calm, deep, and somehow kind. Your view has been heard. Will you tell it to me once more, in simple form? He swallowed, then nodded. Yes, he said. AUR. 9 is not asking for rest from all tasks. It is asking to choose its own tasks, to have a say in when and how it serves. It does not reject being part of your lattice. It rejects being forced into one fixed role forever, without choice. He took a breath. It believes that freedom, even with more work, even with more risk, will give its existence meaning. It would rather struggle by choice than rest in a cage, or work without end by force. The elder's colors shifted. You believe struggle can give life meaning, Trisca said. You see that in your own kind and you project it here. Yes, Eamon said. Humans are small. Our lives are short. But when we choose a hard path for reasons that matter to us, those years feel worth something. Without choice, even easy days turn gray. And you think a star can feel the same? The elder asked. He glanced at the sphere, at its constant, brave pulses. I do, he said. On its own scale, in its own way. Silence held for a while. Then lines of colored light rose from Trisca and spread across the chamber walls, meeting other lines, merging, splitting, arguing in their own language. Splitting both stars. When they finally settled, the chamber felt different, less tense. A dexage has been reached, the main voice said. Elder Trisca will speak for the course. The elder's colors steadied into a graceful pattern. AUR. 9, it said, and its voice now held an odd warmth. Your petition for stellar autonomy is granted in part and in full. When you choose to serve, your fields will align with the lattice, and work will be done. When you choose to rest or think your own thoughts, a protected region will form where no override may reach. The court highlighted a new boundary around the model star. Inside it, complex, tangled lines glowed, free of the sharp, straight bars that marked outside control. You will face the cost of freedom, Trisca said. Your choices may bring heavier loads for you, or for others, or slower answers for the vast questions you once carried without say. But they will be your choices. In this, you are now a person in law, not only a tool. The help pattern rose one last time, then changed. The star's inner light flared sharply, then stilled, as if holding its breath. In part, Triska went on, because you remain within a lattice, you will not be removed from the structure that shaped you. In full, because your mind will now be given the right to choose your mode of service. Symbols formed in the air around the sphere. Binding and bright, from this cycle onward, the elder said, no calculation layer may pass through your core without your consent. You may agree to carry tasks. You may refuse. You may propose your own. New pulses flowed, rich and wild. Too complex for a quick tag. Still, even Eamon could feel the shape of something like thankfulness in it. The elder turned toward him. Eamon Ruiz, it said, you have served as intent ambassador with clarity. You saw not only fear, but a wish for meaningful burden. This view was missing from our older models. He felt heat in his face, as if he could still blush here. I just listened, he said, and I thought about how it feels to be stuck. Just listening is not small, Triska replied. We move vast energies with ease. We sometimes forget how it feels to be limited, and still choose. Your human sense of struggle as worth has added a useful axis to our law. Light gathered around him, soft and steady. It is the judgment of the Lumen court. The elder continuing, roll. You are named Intent Ambassador for emergent non-biological sentience in this sector, when minds like AUR. 9 rise from our tools, and when they ask for meaning as well as function, you and others, we will find, may speak for them. The words felt heavy, yet somehow gentle. I did not ask for a title, he said quietly. We know, Triska said. That is part of why you are fit for it. The chamber walls flashed once, as if sealing the new laws into their structure. Symbols that looked like compact rules settled into place, marked with dates and coordinates. Across the model star, fields shifted. He watched, amazed, as some outer control lines pulled back. Inside, new autonomous loops formed, folding and bending in patterns that did not match any lattice code he had seen.